Alright, so everyone, so this is going to be the 5-minute guide to drum and bass. So, I think drum and bass is dope, so I'm going to show you how to make it in 5 minutes or less. Alright, so first thing you're going to want to do is get your BPM established, right? So, I personally recommend 170s to 180s, but, you know, if you want to trickle down somewhere else, feel free. I'm personally at 174 for this particular track. And, yeah, so once you get your BPM selected, we're going to move on to the drums. So, I always recommend picking out your drums first because, you know, drums are kind of the backbone of, you know, your track. So, for example, if you're trying to make like some liquid drum and bass, some more chill stuff, you're not going to want a super hard fat kick, right? Or a super hard fat snare. But if you're making like heavy roller drum and bass, you're not going to want a liquid drum and bass kick or a liquid drum and bass snare. So, always pick drums, you know, that are closest to the vibe you're trying to go for, so you don't have to process the fuck out of them, you know, just to get them where they need to be. So I always recommend programming in the kick and the snare at the same time because you kind of need that reference. But if you're ever having some challenges, got a nice little metronome up here. This thing will tell you if you're, you know, fucked up, right? So this sounds good to me. So you go with that. After that, you want to get some percussion in on this unit, right? Then I also layered on some claps, you know, get a little swing in there, a little flow, so then everything together sounds like this, right? Alright, so once you get the drums dialed in to your satisfaction, you're going to want to move on to the sidechain next. So, the reason I say that is because it's happened to me way too many times. I'll make a dope drop, I'll forget the sidechain, I'll go throw some sidechain on, and then it will just fuck up the whole drop and not dope, right? So if you don't already know, all sidechain really does is it ducks the volume when the kick hits, right? So you get kick, then bass, instead of mud, then bass, right? So you get a good punch in the kick, and then a good punch in the bass. So there's like 1,000 ways to achieve this. If you're a little broke boy like me, you know, throw on a nice utility here, and just draw in the sidechain manually. You know, just match it up with the kicks, draw a line down, sidechain there, just kind of match it up, and then you can adjust the size of this, you know, just depending on your punchiness preferences, or you can invest in expensive plugins to do it for you, or like a compressor or whatever. But utility's dope, it works, and that's how I do it. So, alright, so once the sidechain's all dialed into your liking, we finally get to move on to the cool shit, right? The basses. So for the basses, it would be a good example because this track primarily consists of the most common basses you'll find in drum and bass. So for example, we got our classic respace here. And if you're ever curious, there's thousands of respace tutorials out there, but just for the gist of it, it's normally just two detuned saws. As you can see, you mess with the fin a bit here. So if I put this at 0, it's gonna sound like this. But then as I crank it up, you'll feel we'll get more width and more movement. And also, you're going to want a good amount of unison as well, just kind of adds to that effect. So then you got like some fills, you know, just some random bass stabs. And then for the most important bass, it's usually called, I don't even know what it's called, maybe the roller bass, but it's just the kind of fundamental bass that's going to be most pronounced through your drum and bass drop. For example, it's this one and this drop here. Then when it's paired with the respace, it's going to sound like this. Alright, and like the main thing about these types of basses is they usually consist of like a fuckload of triplets and dotted notes. And if you're like me and you can't or don't want to try to keep programming in like triplets or dotted or just mess with the piano roll, easy fix for you, right? So Serum, you got options down here. Usually they're unchecked, but I always check these now because it's super easy now to dial in and test out different, you know, LFO rates or triggers, right? So you can easily go from like a dotted note to to a triplet note, just like that, instead of having to mess around with the piano roll. So, alright, so onto the sub. So if you've ever been to like a show with a good PA, you know, good sub bass, you know, you'll know that like feeling it's part of like the experience, right? So most producers, especially when they start off, they're just gonna chuck a fucking sine wave sub throughout the whole drop, right? But pretty easy thing that you can do is change the sub per element. Just kind of link them up and have a dedicated sub for one bass, have a dedicated sub for another bass. It just adds, you know, more layers of depth to your music. So yeah, that's just kind of the basic overview and some tips on how to make drum and bass and make it sound cool. So hope you enjoyed, subscribe, and fuck yeah, go stream this track too.